Welcome back to Senior Savvy Cannabis. I'm Katherine Goldberg. Today, I have a treat for you and I have a treat for me. I recently made a video that got a bit of attention where I shared my experience that sativa strains aren't as energizing as I remember them to be. And everyone, not everyone, a lot of people agreed. I wanted to get to the bottom of this. And I was told that Jeff at Jade Nectar was the man to talk to. We are so lucky to be joined by Jeff, who has been in this industry for decades. Um, Jeff, thank you for being here. And so all these people wrote in and said, I thought it was just me. I thought I'm just getting older. What is going on with the sativa that's being sold in the dispensaries? What happened to the weed that we all remember?
Well, first of all, just know that it's not just you. Like all of these people are having this experience and sort of they're pondering what's going on with the cannabis because they remember back when they used to smoke weed, it would get you high. That's what we called it. Hey, let's go get high. And you got high and you went and giggled and you got silly and it was a little psychedelic and it was inspirational and it was a life amplifying experience, not a sedative, lethargic, sleepy, tired, numb experience. And I had this experience myself. I've gone through the same exact process, but this was about probably about 15 years ago, where yes, I started consuming cannabis. I'd taken a little break from it for a while. And yeah, I had the same experience. I was like, I guess I'm getting old or it just doesn't work for me. And maybe those were just sentimental times when I was just a silly teenager in early 20s, just being goofy, and weed just doesn't agree with my old body anymore. And I just feel tired and kind of stupid and lethargic, and it's not a whole lot of fun. Um, but then, uh, yeah, started to realize. I think someone, it's a long story, but someone had shared with me some old sativa. In fact, I think it was Super Silver Haze, which turns out was really popular in the 90s and early 2000s. And it's very energizing, very electric. And so I had that experience. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, there is weed out there. It's not me. It's the weed. The new weed just is not engineered or designed to be giggly and silly and light and fluffy and happy. It seems to be more of a opioid sedative downer experience these days. So anyway, I ended up going on a quest to go find all the old weed that I grew up on that I had lots of fun with. And sure enough, once started growing like the old Mexican, Thai, Cambodian landrace varieties that we used to import into the United States from overseas, and these were real deal sativas. Yeah, sure enough, the giggles, the smiles, the life amplification, the creativity, it's still there. So it's just know, everybody, if you're having this same experience, it's not you, it's the weed.
It's the weed. It's the dispensary weed. So, just for our newer audience members, we hear a lot about the myth of sativa and indica, but it hasn't always been a myth. Can you explain the bridge between landrace and sativa, just so we understand the broader
Oh,
context?
okay. And these are
Of
generalizations, but there
course.
really are indica types and there really are sativa types.
That's what I keep saying.
And the sativa types are tend to be more tropical, not 100%, but more equatorial, tropical. So you're thinking like Thai, like old Thai stick, Cambodian. So I've taken deep dives into the landrace genetics.
Hmm.
Um, uh, yeah. So anyway, Thai, Sri Lankan, Cambodian, Vietnamese, Colombian. Most of the old Mexican varieties were all sativa, and that's the narrow leaf drug type. They tend to have very long, thin, lacy leaves. They tend to be very tall plants. If you grow them outdoors, they get like 10 feet tall. And then commercially,
Mhm.
especially for here in California or wherever you are in the United States, they can be very challenging to grow in the US because they're equatorial. So they have a
Mm.
very long flowering period, which anywhere from 12 weeks, which is 3 months, to 16 weeks and beyond. And when you're in an equatorial area that's constantly warm and at a 12-12 light cycle and such, um, yeah, it's not a problem to actually grow them in those areas. But growing those in California,
Mm.
it's kind of like trying to grow tropical mangoes
Mhm.
here in California.
Just doesn't work.
They're just not suited for the outdoor environment. Plus, they take a long time. So if you're talking yield and the farmer, if they're in it just for the money and they're trying to get maximum yield in the shortest amount of time and such, long, thin. Oh, and by the way, sativas tend to be wispy
Mhm.
and light and airy, and they need to be light and airy, and that's because in equatorial tropical areas there's moisture, there's
Mhm.
rain, there's humidity. So if you have a super dense heavy bud, you're going to get mold. um, but if you're trying to grow weed that has maximum density for maximum weight in the fastest amount of time, um, the sativa, the true equatorial tropical sativas,
Are
are
not
not,
good for business.
yeah, they're not good for business.
So you said something recent when we were talking offline, that struck me. You said something about the plant is not suited for, you phrased it a lot better than I'm going to phrase it, but something about the plant is not suited for big business.
Um, so
Did I get that right? That
yeah,
sentiment right?
I that is, and it's proving out. If you just look at California cannabis, legal cannabis industry, and then this same thing is the same movies kind of playing out in every single state that legalizing. Very high hopes, lots of big projections, and then it turns out the entire industry starts imploding, and then there's mass actually surpluses of crappy industrial ag grown weed. And if, so I'm going to say something. I have a new term that going to say kind of for the first time in public here,
Coining it
but
here on Senior Savvy.
it's yes. Okay, so this is a new sort of political philosophy for cannabis, and I'm calling it pragmatic woo-wooism. So
What does that mean?
it means pragmatic, using logic and observing and applying scientific reason to woo-woo, sort of out there cosmic concepts and philosophies.
Hmm.
And there seems to be some truth to it here and we've got to remember, at its core, at its base, cannabis is a psychedelic plant. Now, some people, may debate what the definition of a psychedelic is, but it is a mind altering plant that changes your mental perspectives or your place in the universe, and you kind of opens up doors and windows to different points of view and different concepts. So it's, and a lot of people consume it for the woo woo. They want, to tap in sort of the non
That
mundane
sentence. Yeah.
cosmic experience and have some different thoughts, different perspectives, or get creative and some inspiration. Uh, so there seems to be, in my opinion, and I just keep watching this out, I'm starting to just really believe it, that there is this sort of cosmic force within the universe, and cannabis seems to be an ambassador or vector or conduit for this. And we can get into love and intention and energy and these sort of concepts. But for some reason, a lot of people, when they consume cannabis,
Mhm.
seem to have this communal agreement that yes, being kind and respectful and having integrity and respecting the planet and doing things in regenerative, environmentally friendly ways where you're not harming others and
Mhm.
you're actually doing things to benefit the greater good seems to jive with the cannabis vibe, like when you consume it. And then when you apply that then to how it's farmed,
Mhm.
how it's created, and then even how it's run as a business, um, it seems totally appropriate, totally pragmatic to apply some of this woo-woo cosmic philosophy to cannabis businesses. And when folks don't apply, where it's just very self-centered, actually poisoning their customers and knowingly using dirty weed to do and lab fraud and things like that just to do short-term profits at the expense of your customers and kind of degrading cannabis, the plant itself, those stories don't seem to work out very well. A lot of those companies who've applied those practices are going down.
So
So anyway.
I I can get behind that. I can totally get behind that. Um, as a consumer,
Mm-hmm.
um, in a perfect world, I would have a direct relationship with a local grower. Um, is that is that a model that could, how do we course correct? Because do you think the industry needs to uh, be totally torn down and rebuilt? Are we at that point? Or can we, as consumers, make changes where we demand certain things or we stop purchasing certain things so that the business owners, the ones who respect the plant and maybe even use the plant themselves, can say, we need to make changes or else it's going to be a problem?
Um, yeah, so I have to be a little guarded and tactful and mindful when I say things because I'm trying to be a team player with the
Of course.
decision makers
Of
and the
course.
bureaucracies. And we have the DCC, we have the state, we have the governor, and we have to remind ourselves that this entire Prop 64, everything, this was all sort of a venture into the unknown.
Mm.
And so it's easy to Monday morning quarterback or whatever and second guess. And but when you really have to be the decision makers who are trying to administer an industry, it's tough. And it's hard to know what the right decisions are. Um, but uh, so here's my honest belief is that cannabis through pragmatic woo-wooism seems to be demonstrating that it thrives best and you get the most high vibing best cannabis from small artisan craft farms. um, it Cannabis does not seem to respond well or create quality product in an industrial row crop commodity margin driven cutting corners, just turning it into another commodity like broccoli or grain or such like that. Cannabis is in a different category, and there does seem to be some sort of energy or intention, or just to really get that really high quality cannabis, it
Mhm.
requires some level of care and stewardship that is just not possible. I mean, you can buy all the gadgets in the world and all the automation and all the sprayers and everything, but we're just seeing that, lack of better words, industrial farmed cannabis sucks. Pretty much universally, everyone agrees it doesn't reach the expectations of a consumer. It just doesn't, it's not enlightening
Mm.
and doesn't provide a cosmic experience. And that's because it's grown in an environment that's not enlightening and not cosmic and not sustainable or for the greater good. It's all about margins and profits for, the plantation owner or whatever you call it. It's the whole structure is just off, and not in line with cannabis values. So that said, and when Prop 64 came along, full disclosure, I did vote for it. But if you read Prop 64, it said over and over, micro business licenses.
Mm-hmm.
And what this was small, independent, like family farms could do cultivation, distribution, manufacturing, retail, all in an enclosed system. And so it gave the impression that we were going to have like a small winery type structure and model for the industry, which if you look at Sonoma, Carmel Valley, Napa, and such, the backbone of those wine industries are the small independent artisan wineries who then can do wine tours, educate consumers on how they run their vineyard and do their wine, and then can sell directly to those consumers. And then the consumer goes, hey, but I live 5 hours away from here in California. How do I get more of your wine? Oh, you can join the wine club and we'll ship you a bottle or 2 bottles of our wine every month. That is a model that has worked. Nowadays, there's a whole nother thing with the California wine industry with corporate consolidation. So that's another topic. But for about 30 years or so, if not more, 30 or 40 years, the small artisan craft winery model has been very successful. And it also blesses entire communities because it brings in tourism, which benefits restaurants, benefits shuttle buses, benefits lodging. So yes, the small, and by the way, in our current cannabis industry, one of the major problems is we have surpluses of cannabis biomass, of just flower. We have too much. So what we've done by these 50-acre farms and just all these big mega farms, we've created surpluses of shitty weed, pardon my crappy weed, whatever's PC here.
You're allowed.
We have surpluses of really low grade weed that nobody wants to consume, that's driven down the prices, which have made it unsustainable for people who grow quality craft artisan weed. They are being undercut by those industrial grown surplus weed. So it's a real bummer. We could have had 2,000, 3,000 small independent family type farms supplying all the cannabis for California. We never needed these huge industrial bloated farms, and
we're suffering the consequences of it now.
Yeah. So to get anyway, and there's things we're doing now where we're trying to connect the farmer directly with the customer.
Good.
And we're running a bill right now that has to do with shipping directly to customers within but it's for medical patients. So right now, as a very small, very narrow pilot program, because there's a whole nother issue where medical patients are now having an access crisis.
Because they go to the dispensary and there's it's only high THC products.
So you have a 5-year-old kid who experiences seizures. You go to a dispensary, and I'm not trying to be mean or critical, but in reality, most of the products at a dispensary are kind of like a gas station, convenience store, junk food. You're not going to give your 5-year-old child with epilepsy a pina colada flavored vape pen or a fluorescent green sour apple gummy. It's
Hmm.
just, that's not medicine. That's not appropriate medicine. Um, so the medical patients are not able to find appropriate products anymore. And it's a structural thing. It's not a witch hunt against dispensaries. It's just not profitable. And the reality is medical patients are not concentrated in one geographic area.
Right.
So for a brick and mortar dispensary to carry specialized medical products where they may only have 2 or 3 patients who need that within 50 miles, it doesn't make sense. So the only thing that makes sense is actually shipping
Hmm.
directly to medical patients within California these very specialized products that dispensaries don't carry. And now all of a sudden we can utilize our shipping infrastructure to reach that. And by the way, that's what Canada did right off the bat.
Did
So
they do it
Canada,
right? Has anyone done it right?
well, Canada, the reason why Canada had it a lot easier
Mhm.
is they made it federally legal.
So it's not a state by state.
Correct.
That's what it seems like. It seems like we need to have one system. This state by state system is not working.
And technically, all of the states who are legal are actually federally illegal. They've just, the uh, Department of Justice or whatever has just agreed, sort of casually, has an agreement to not enforce on states who've gone legal. But the federal government could change their mind at any point and say, no, this is Schedule 1, and come in and raid every single
You have
legal
someone wake up
dispensary.
with a stomach ache or something and they take it out on, like it really could change at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, so Canada went federally legal for all of Canada immediately.
Hmm.
So there was never a question of
Hmm.
whether it's legal or not. And then to reach all their medical patients, they can ship through the Canadian Postal Service
Okay.
across province lines. Now, is the Canadian system perfect? No, but that's, so they have that advantage. And logical mind said we need to take care of the medical patients. How are we going to reach them? Oh, the only way to reach them, especially in remote areas of Canada, is to use our postal infrastructure. So we're trying to do the same thing here in California for the medical patients, but we have to use carriers, cargo, parcel services that do not cross state lines.
Oi. Okay.
Yeah.
Oi. We have a lot of work to do.
Anyway, but
Okay, but
that's
and we're gonna do it.
right.
Just because I'm curious. Um, First of all, my two questions are, can you tell me about the medical products that you guys grow and make? And before that, because I feel like people might be listening, being like, yeah, this is all well and good, but like I live down the street from a dispensary. It seems good enough. What exactly are they doing to the weed that's making it so dangerous that we really should at least have this conversation?
Well,
Please.
uh, again, I am trying to
Oh,
be
you can't get in
minor
trouble.
and tactful, but if anyone is not aware, they should definitely, I for a health and safety
Yeah.
reason, I'm just going to share very public information, which is the LA Times
Mhm.
articles that were written based on their investigations and their um, research
What did they
into
find?
um, there are a lot of products that contain stuff they're not supposed to contain.
Like 10% of the products on the market? 20%?
Well, check out the LA Times article. The vape pens, I think it was about 50% of what they tested positive for things that are not supposed to be in there, that you do not want to be combusting and inhaling straight into your lungs.
Okay. We've only got a couple minutes left because I have the
Yeah.
free Zoom and we're going to do this again. Um,
Okay.
but can you I'm going to throw something out there that's not connected at all, but you're like the king of THCV. I
Well,
recently,
I don't know about King or anything like that, but I've taken a deep dive.
um, can you just tell, because hopefully this is going to be a regular thing because you're fabulous and we all have so much to learn and so much work to do together. But what kinds of patients benefit the most from THCV?
Well, we're still finding out. The problem was THCV was so inaccessible for so long that it was hard for anyone to really, explore and see what it works out, how it helps. Because there's scientific studies, and again, that's challenging because of the federal uh, issues. But a lot of this is kind of at the shamanic level. People just try it and they're like, oh, this really helps. I just found out someone who had, I forget the term of it, but it's a nerve that runs through this part of your head and down into your temples and behind your eyes. And this person was needing to get, I think, injections, pretty gnarly pharmaceutical injections to deal with this nerve pain they'd get, which is
Whoa.
like debilitating. But ever since they found the THCV flower, and I actually gave them seeds and then they grew it themselves, it is the miracle wonder cannabis for them that
Wild.
has just shut down that
Nerve
nerve pain.
pain, which is nearly impossible to treat.
Yeah, and there's metabolic things. Some people think with like diabetes and such, there's metabolic THCV. Unfortunately, has sort of been called the diet weed that it just eliminates munchies. I wouldn't say that's the case. It's just you don't get the ravenous munchies. So it definitely for some people it may have some appetite suppressant, and maybe when you take it more as a isolate
Mm.
version, which I'm not a fan of isolates, but who knows? Maybe there's some a little bit more appetite suppressant there. But for me, when I consume THCV that's mixed with THC, it's just a very clear, focused. It's kind of like you're stoned and you're high, but you know where your car keys are, and you could do accounting and math.
I love it. It's the weed that we need to be the best version of ourselves.
And some people with like attention ADD kind of things really appreciate THCV that it helps them focus.
I love it. I love it.
Uh,
Well, Jeff, you're amazing. We're going to set up offline. We'll set up another conversation because we have to talk about the animals next. Um,
oh yeah.
we should have talked about the animals first, but we only had 40 minutes. So, everyone who's listening, please stay tuned. We'll have Jeff back. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. This was so enlightening. At the very least, I just hope people realize that they are being poised. That's a little rough. That there might be more choices than only visiting their dispensary. They there are other options out there.
Yeah, and just learning that not all weed is the same. It matters how it's grown, and it's not just how it's grown, it's even the genetics. Because you can take really a great farmer who grows everything organically, regeneratively, but if that cannabis genetic is engineered for a really lethargic, heavy
Hmm.
stone that numbs you out,
It'll turn out like that.
it's going to be numb. So there's a genetic component where cannabis has been engineered to be more of an opioid experience.
Hmm.
That's happened in the last 10, 15 years. Like it's like a test of your manhood. Can you survive this
I hate it.
debilitating
We got to course
weed?
correct.
Yes. Or um, but going back to the land races,
Yeah,
which were just more uplifting experience and a lot more meditative and dreamy and cosmic. Even the indicas, by the way, typically the land races are not couch locky.
hmm.
The land race indicas are just more dreamy and meditative, but clear. So
This is
they
the weed
don't
we
knock
need.
you out.
I love it. Okay,
So
I think we're going to
Yeah,
get cut off in about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, to be continued,
To
but
be
super
continued.
appreciate your show, your platform, everything you're doing.
Absolutely my pleasure. I'm thrilled we could connect. You really are saving us all. So we'll talk soon, Jeff.
Spread the word. Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.